Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Sandy Chernoff, author of 5 Secrets to Effective Communication. Sandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. I'm happy to be here.
Are you ready to get started?
Sure.
All right. Question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, I would give them it's a two-part answer. Number one, when I decided to write my book, I started to blog, Paul, because what I wanted to do was get down the ideas that I wanted to put into the book. So I started blogging to sort of do that. But then when it comes to getting a book published, as a first-time book writer, the big publishing companies will not give you the time of day. So unless you know someone at one of those companies, they're not going to help you. But because I was doing a lot of networking, I met a couple of people who help people write books. And I interviewed 3 people, and only one of them actually brought books that she had published. And she calls herself a book project manager, and she's very professional, and I hired her. And what she did is, first of all, she designed my book. So she helped me pick the fonts, and we did the cover design and the layouts and all that kind of thing. And she also got me a professional editor so that I knew somebody was going through, because when because I give live workshops. So it's very different to be standing in front of an audience and looking at their face and you can see they're confused or, whatever. But it's very different when somebody is reading your book and you're not there. And so what she helped me to do was to turn something that I might be speaking orally into something that would make more sense in the written word. And she was really good. She was really helpful. And of course, the other side of it, you need someone, or you need a group of people, whatever, to proofread your book. Because the last thing you want is a whole lot of grammatical and spelling and punctuational errors in your book, because it looks very unprofessional. And I had 4 people proofread my book, so that we made sure that we found all the things before we put it into print. So I think it's very important to find somebody to work with so that you can make sure that your book looks professional. Because I'll tell you a quick funny story. One of the things I did to get my book out there is I went into a local bookstore and I asked to speak to the manager. And she came out and I said, I was just wondering if you'd be interested in selling my book. So she looked at me, Paul, and she goes, well, is it self-published? And I said, actually it is. And she went, oh. So then I whipped out my book and she said, oh, well, it doesn't look self-published. And I said, that's because I had professional help. She said, okay, we'll sell your book. And she does. And she's still selling it. So, part of it is not being afraid to ask. And bookstores, I did a lot of promos for my book in bookstores. And then because they got a good crowd, and because people wanted to buy the book, they then carry the book. I'm in a pretty large book company that has stores all over British Columbia. It's called the Book Warehouse and Blackbond Books. They have 2 different names for their stores, but they're all over the province. And I did promos in a number of their locations and had good turnouts for all of them. And so they bought my book. But then I never heard back from them. So I contacted the owner of that company and asked her. And she said to me, that was actually really funny. She said, you know what? We bought books from a lot of the authors. She said, yours were the only one that sold. I want more. I said, okay, tell me where to take them. So they sell my books, and every time she's run out of books, she sends me an email and I go back to the same place and bring them more books. So it's not really that hard if you aren't afraid to talk to people about selling your book or promoting your book or whatever. And I sell my book off my website. And because I blog on 2 other websites and 2 of them have bookstores, I also sell it through there. And I also write in a magazine out of Atlanta, Georgia. And they also have a bookstore. And I'll tell you, I got that contract from Twitter because my publisher told me after I published my book, I needed to tweet about it. So I did. And she contacted me and said, "Oh, your book sounds really interesting. Will you write me an article for my magazine about it?" So I did. And after a couple of other articles, she called me and she said, "Listen, we're really enjoying your articles. We'd like you to become a regular columnist and I'll pay you." And she does. So, it's just a matter of getting yourself out there. I blog on a website called Biz Catalyst 360, and I met the owner of this website through LinkedIn. He's in Tampa, Florida. And he must have read some of my blogs and asked me to submit a couple to him. And then he also called me and he said, "Sandy, I want you to become a regular columnist on this site. We'll give you your own masthead." And on his site, I have my own masthead. It's called Soft Skills Matter. And he publishes a blog of mine about every couple of weeks. And he also does an execu brief that he sends out to all his followers. And sometimes he picks articles of mine. He also collaborates with other websites. And sometimes my articles get picked. He also has several groups on LinkedIn and Facebook and whatever, and he publishes, plus he started his own platform, and he publishes articles from some of his columnists there. So what it's done, Paul, is it's given me credibility. Because if you're all over the place, then you must know what you're talking about. And, with people reading it and you end up with more followers because of all of that, then there's a better chance that you're going to sell your book. I mean, the reason I know that some of those book sales are coming from his website is because I've been shipping books to the Eastern United States. And trust me, living in Vancouver, BC, they probably aren't getting them off of my website. So it's a very interesting thing that you need to get out there. And the other thing I did to promote the book was I contacted the library system in the Lower Mainland of Vancouver. And I went to all the suburban libraries as well as the one downtown. And they actually have speakers and they will promote you. And I spoke at probably 7 or 8 different libraries. Every library I spoke at bought 3 or 4 copies of my book. And at the event, I sold many books. For example, at the Vancouver Downtown Library, they gave me a room to seat 50 people. And I thought, oh my goodness, is they going to fill this room? Well, they not only filled the room, they turned people away at the door. And I sat down after the promotion. I sold 30 books that night, Paul. So there are lots of things you can do even as an individual to promote your book that doesn't really cost much and to get your book out there and gets people knowing that you are an author. And people look at you differently when they know you've written a book. And it's also put me on podcasts. A guy who came to one of the library promotions has a radio show. And he invited me to come and speak on his radio show about my book. And his big audience is Iranian. And I got contacted by somebody from this. They wanted to translate my book into Farsi.
Wow.
So it's the old story. If you don't ask, you don't get. And what you have to do, and you and I mentioned this a little bit earlier before we started the podcast, everybody seems to draw a line in the sand and stand behind it because that's their comfort zone. But when you're trying to promote something, whether it's your business or your book or products or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You have to come out of that comfort zone. You are your brand. You are representing whatever it is your business is. And it's the same thing with your book. You have to promote it. You have to show that you're passionate about it so that people will be interested, because passion is contagious. And if people believe that you know what you're talking about and you really care about this sort of thing, then they're far more likely to ask you more questions and to be interested in your book. I mean, my book is small, Paul. It only has about 130 pages, because what I discovered is people don't read big books. They buy them, they put them on their shelf, and they show people that they have them, but they don't necessarily read them. Because my book is small, it's been read by pretty much everybody who's bought it, and I've had very good feedback because they have found it to be very easy to read. Each chapter is laced with stories and examples. At the end of the chapter, I give the reader an exercise to try out what they learned in that chapter. And then the very last page of each chapter is just a numbered list of the key takeaways on that aspect of communication. So it's like a little communication handbook. And the reason I wrote it is because everybody thinks they know how to communicate. We've been doing it since we were born. But the truth is, most people aren't very good at it. And as a result, they experience a lot of conflict and disappointment and resentment and complaining and and miscommunication, and all of this causes us stress. We don't need any more stress. Thank you very much. So I wrote the book to demystify the complexities of communication so that people could do it better and be more successful and happier in all aspects of their lives, because it is so key to everything that we do. If we can't communicate with honesty, authenticity, impact, and influence, how are we going to do anything? It just doesn't work. So people need to know how to do it. And it's not that hard if you know what some of the keys are and what some of the approaches are and what some of the strategies are. And that's what I really wanted to get across with my book. And hopefully that's what's been happening with the people who have read the book, because I've had very good feedback. So it's been an interesting process. It was a very steep learning curve, but it was fun. And I'm glad that I did it. I have an idea for another book, but until I sell all of this one, which I've done about 3/4 of what I printed. So, but it's just, I think it's a very interesting thing to do. And I encourage people who have ideas to do it, to get off your bum and actually start doing it. But get the right help, get some professional help so that your book looks professional, and then it will sell better. Because I saw a lot of people that I know who wrote books and self-published them, and they look self-published. They look like you ran it off on your own computer. Not good.
Absolutely. Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published? I know we've already touched on a lot of these topics a little bit. Just taking a little deeper dive into that, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges?
Well, I think the biggest challenges are finding the right people to help you, Paul, because honestly, if you've never written a book before, you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I didn't even understand that it needs to have a proper design. And that's why the lady that I hired, she's a book designer, and she's won awards for her book designs. And she was terrific to work with. In fact, we have become friends. I still see her. And I have recommended her to other people because she's so wonderful to work with. I learned so much from her. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, is finding the right person. Because if you do, or group, company like your company, to help you do this and to do it professionally. Because there's no point in publishing a book that looks unprofessional. Because it hurts you. You look like you don't know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So at least hire people who do. So that your book can look professional. And that's one of the hardest things is finding somebody to help you, and then making sure that it gets done appropriately. I don't know, a lot of people get them printed in India, different places. Well, it's really far away. You don't know what's going on. And if it comes back and it's not in, the way you wanted it, it's kind of, how do you fix it? I actually used a Canadian printer who is located just outside of Winnipeg, Manitoba. And they were fantastic. They delivered the books to my front door on exactly the day they said they were going to come. And they allowed me access through their website, so that even though I had 4 people proofread it, I actually proofread it on their site. And I found one error that nobody else found. And it cost me $40 to fix it, but I decided I was going to fix it anyway. They were absolutely terrific. They really were, and I was so glad that my book project manager had suggested that I use this company. They're very reputable, and I really didn't think they were unreasonable. And again, the service was incredible, because even when I tried to go on their website, I had a little trouble, so I phoned the guy, and he said to me, "Boy, you got farther than most people." It was very funny, but they were exceedingly helpful, very supportive. And it made that part of the process easy too. So it's just a matter, again, you have to find the right people to help you. You cannot do this on your own. Absolutely. And end up with something that's good.
Absolutely. Let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
Well, I think that doing promotions for your book, so doing them in bookstores, and I mean, I've even done one in Indigo in Toronto, just because my son lives there and I go there often. So I contacted them ahead of time, and I did 2 promos in 2 different locations. But One of the ones was their big store downtown. And again, it's just a matter of asking, Paul. It's not really a big deal. And I brought my own books in, and whatever I sold through their store, they gave me they paid me what is the normal return for books. I mean, I charge $20 for my book, and I get $12 from the bookstores. They make $8. I don't know whoever decided that, whatever. I was very surprised, but that's what I get when it's sold in the bookstores. I get $12, the bookstore gets $8. If I sell it directly to people, then I get the full $20. But even bringing my own books into Indigo, they allowed me to do that. And it was the same thing that the promotions I did at the public library. I often speak at conferences. It's one of the things that I do. I sometimes do keynotes, and sometimes I'm just part of their program. Generally speaking, most of the conferences I speak at, they allow me to bring my book in. So I sell it at those places as well. And it's just a matter of, again, if you don't ask, you don't get. There's nothing wrong with bringing your book when you do a speaking engagement or having your book with you. I mean, I call it my very expensive business card. I almost never go anywhere without my book. And I've sold it in the most surprising place. I've sold it in coffee shops. Because if I'm sitting there and talking to someone, one day I was sitting there talking to a friend, and he had bought my book some time ago, but we were talking about it, and there was a young man sitting beside me, and he was on his laptop, and all of a sudden he taps me on the shoulder, and he says, "Can I have a look at your book?" And I looked over at him, and he'd already Googled me on his computer, because obviously he'd seen my name on the book, and he'd already Googled me. So I handed him the book. He looked at it, and he gave it back to me, and he said, "Can I buy it?" I said, "Sure." So he asked me how much it was, and he handed me the $20. And my friend said to me, "Well, that's the easiest sale you ever made." And I said, "Well, you know what? Here's the funny thing, Bart. This has happened to me more than once." So it's good to talk about your book. It's good to let people know that you have a book and what it's about and why it would be advantageous for them to have it. And any opportunity that you can get, bring it along. Share it with people and find opportunities. Again, you can do promotions in the libraries. You can do promotions at conferences. You can do promotions in bookstores. And if the bookstores feel that it was well received, then they'll sell your book for you. So it's not really that hard. It's just a matter of, again, you got to step over that line in the sand, and you have to get out there and let people know that you have a book. So it's just doing that.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Well, I actually have a couple of authors that I like. And one of them is Daniel Pink. And he's written a book called Drive. And it's about the surprising truth about what motivates us. A lot of people think that money motivates us, but that's not necessarily the best motivator, especially if it's a cognitive issue. Sometimes it actually works against you. So he's done a deep dive into what motivates people, and it's a very interesting book. So he's quite an interesting guy. And then I like John Maxwell because he's a leadership expert, and I've probably read 3 or 4 of his books. And then there's another guy that I met, and I've done workshops with him, like we've collaborated together. He's a marketer, Paul, and he's written a very interesting book. It's called Be Different or Be Dead. And he talks about what happens when you try to set yourself ahead of the herd. You know, when you do something to make yourself stand out from your competitors. And he said what happens is, especially if it's something pretty unique, then everybody in the industry starts to copy you. So then you lose your competitive edge because everybody copied you. But he said you have to keep coming up with things that set you apart. And one of my favorite stories is about Nordstrom's, because they have the most unique customer service program. They really, really, really train all their people exceedingly well, so that no matter who you encounter in the store, they're going to go out of their way. I'll give you a quick example. I was having lunch in their restaurant in downtown Vancouver with 2 of my girlfriends, and one of my friends ordered salad. that had some kind of dressing on it that she really liked. So she said to the waitress, I really like this dressing. She said, oh, we sell it in the store. Would you like me to go downstairs and get you a bottle? And she went downstairs and got my friend a bottle.
Nice.
Where does that happen? So when I teach customer service, I tell people that in your business, if you really want to stand out from the crowd, develop some kind of customer service process and educate all your people so that no matter what, people are going to walk away happy, because otherwise it's not customer service. It's a misnomer. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, and what I tell them is what you need to do is make sure that it's consistent, it's excellent. And, you know, people will remember their first contact with you. They'll remember the last contact. They'll remember repeated contacts if they're nice. What happens when something goes wrong, that's when you have to be gasp-worthy, because you want people to remember how you fixed that wrong rather than what went wrong. And this is the kind of thing that Nordstrom does, and it's what they've educated their people to do, to sort of go that extra mile. And rather than, you know, promising things you can't deliver, they under-promise and way, way, way over-deliver, so that people walk out of there feeling very satisfied and very happy and very well taken care of. So of course they're going to come back, and likely they're going to tell their friends too. So it's a matter of what are we doing? And it's the same thing with your book. Tell people about it, and tell them about people who have read it and how they really enjoyed it and found it very helpful or whatever. It's just a matter of letting the public know that you have something that they might like to have. And that's why I was told to tweet about it. And I got a lot of interest in my book from tweeting about it on Twitter. I was actually surprised, but I wasn't on Twitter before I published my book, Paul.
Nice.
And they helped me set up a profile. And as I say, I mean, that's how I got the contract with this magazine in Atlanta, was through my Twitter account, through tweeting about my book. So it's not really that hard to do the promotions, but it takes a little bit of a plan, and it takes some effort from you to promote it in a way that's going to work, and that's going to make you happy, and that's going to get you results. So it's just a matter, again, you got to hire the right people.
Absolutely. And for our final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Okay, I'm going to give you, I have lots, but here's one that I like. It's called Success. To know what to do is wisdom. To know how to do it is skill. To know when to do it is judgment. To strive to do it best is dedication. To do it for others is compassion. To do it quietly is humility. To get the job done is achievement. To get others to do all these things is leadership.
Excellent.
So if you're going to, you know, have a good team, you need to model the way. And if you model the behaviors and the attitudes and the respect and all those kinds of things that you want everybody in your organization to do, then you have a far better chance that they actually will do it. If you don't set the example, chances are none of that stuff's going to happen.
Absolutely. Well, Sandy, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Well, probably with my soft skills website. So it's softskillsforsuccess.com.
Excellent. Well, Sandy, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
And thank you very much for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.